Yeah, we need to get together on that.
All right, I've got 6:30 by my watch. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. If we would, we'll begin with a roll call.
All down here. You got,
Chuck Angier,
Here.
Tim Duffer,
Here.
Brian Fox,
Here.
Brian Garrett,
It's going to be
Kermit
Kermit
King.
King now.
Bobby Lovelace,
here.
Ben Meeks,
Here.
Ron Scares,
Here.
Keith Scruggs,
Here.
Bert Sellers.
Thank you. All right, any additions or revisions to the agenda? I have one item that's been brought up by Mr. Meeks. It'll go under new business as item C. It'll be fee schedule discussion and ad hoc committee appointment to look at the fee schedule for EMS transport billing. Again, that's item C under new business. It'll be fee schedule discussion and ad hoc committee appointment to review the current billing for EMS calls to see if there's any adjustment need to be made. Anyone else have any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I had a motion by,
I had a motion, he second.
motion and a second. Yep, there you go.
Mr. Sellers.
All right, we'll take a minute, if you would, to look over the minutes from the previous meeting. Once everybody's finished reading the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve or to amend as necessary.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Presentations. Having none, we'll move right along. Hearing of the citizens.
Yes, sir, we have two. First, we have Mr. Vic Ingram with the Board of Supervisors signed up.
Good evening, sir.
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. How are y'all?
Great.
I guess I would be considered the opening act for the Assistant Chief Matt Hunt of the Cascade Fire Department. He may not speak, but let me share something with you here. The Cascade Volunteer Fire Department was initially part of an expansion project involving the Brosville Fire Department. And back, let's see, at 1986, it was the Brosville Cascade Volunteer Fire Department. Cascade became independent in 2000 and started out with 10 members. They enjoyed a growth spurt in 2004 and again in 2018, 2019 with the addition of over 30 new members. The department currently has 37 members which are CPR, NIMS, and EVOC certified. In the past, they've only received funding from the county on 2 different occasions. The first time was in 2006 for a pumper, and again in 2011 for a first response truck. In 2019, they purchased 2 ambulances themselves. They didn't ask the county for a dime. They depended on the community. In 2019, like I said, they purchased these 2 ambulances, and they are considered a transport agency, although they are not budgeted as such. They currently have 2 fire trucks. One is a 95 tanker, which is 26 years old, and a 2004 pumper, which is 17 years old. To continue the growth of the department and to meet the needs of the community, they are asking for the assistance and the support of this commission to purchase a 2018 International pumper tanker, which does meet the county's specifications, which we just voted on here recently. The cost of the truck is, of course, $180,000, and they'll be asking this commission to support the allotted amount of $140,000. And as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I'd be honored to bring this up before our board, and I would surely vote in favor of it. The truck that they're seeking to replace is a 1967 AMC brush truck, which is only 54 years old. If you'll see fit to approve this request, as I said, I'll be more than happy to vote to support this for the Cascade Fire Department. With the massive investment, and I'm talking about millions of dollars at the mega park, this is the closest department to the mega park. And there'll be a day where we're going to land some future industry there. And I'm a very proactive-minded person. I would much rather see a fully equipped, well-trained volunteer department ready to respond at a moment's notice, which most departments do that. But we've got to be proactive, and we've got to be ready for that day to come. I'd hate to think that some company came and started building something and had a problem with maybe one of the construction workers and needed fire rescue, and then we had to wait for that equipment to get there. And as you well know, it's at the southern end of the county, probably one of the more remote places. The 30 years that I served this county through the sheriff's office, I can't tell you the number of times that I was down there by myself needing either fire rescue, and it's a long wait. And when Cascade finally opened up and began serving that community, quite frankly, it was a godsend. So I asked you gentlemen to please give some thought about supporting their request. It is much, much needed, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions. But I think Chief Hunt's going to speak right after me, but if not, I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Anybody have any questions for Supervisor Ingram?
Is that gonna be fully equipped, or will y'all have to buy equipment, or?
That's a good Matt Hunt question.
We'll have to buy equipment. We've got a bunch at the station that we're gonna take off. The 67 truck is a brush tender tractor. It's got 1,000 gallons on it, but by the time we've had a lot of mechanical problems with it, so it hadn't run a lot of calls in the past 2 years. It's one of my favorite trucks, but I feel like it can be dangerous for some of the more inexperienced members.
Okay, thank you. Any other
You
questions?
know, I've got to say, we have so many wonderful departments, as though I need to stand here and tell you that. And of course, I was a volunteer fireman for 10 years back when we had Westover Hills, before it was permanently barred by the city of Danville during that Land Theft Act, better known as annexation. But needless to say, when I see a department blossom like this department, it's beyond impressive. And to be where they're at right now and what they've gone through historically, and to have 37 active members, and they purchased 2 ambulances basically out of their own pocket, I just wish we could do more to help them, to be honest with you. I'm just beyond impressed with what they've done. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Matt Hunt is up next.
Chief, come on up.
It's hard to follow up after that, guys. I'm just gonna ask you guys, have any questions on this apparatus? If approved here and by the Board of Supervisors, I am gonna take 2 mechanics, myself and 2 other firefighters, to the location where it's at, and we're gonna spend all day, if not 2 days, checking it out.
Do we know the backstory on the truck, of the history of it, of where it came from originally?
I do know that it's a 2018 chassis. That's what I'm going out there for. I want to make sure we got all the ducks in a row financially, because I know we'll have to go take a loan out to secure the truck, and then I need to see when the money will be available so we can apply it to that loan, because I don't want to, if we had the money sitting there, we'd go for a $300,000 truck, but I don't, my community does not want me to spend that much money, and I'm not going to do that, so.
Very good. Any other questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief.
Thank y'all.
So, Mr. Slint, one question I do have, when is the CIP, when is that CIP money allocated? When are those applications to be turned in by?
There won't be anything set in stone until April, May, when the board actually votes on the budget.
Okay.
So we, there's still, we don't know what will actually get funded.
Okay.
So we do not have to turn them in right now.
Very good, thank you. All right. Moving on to the Fire Rescue Association report, Chief Fowler.
The only report I have from Fire and Rescue is at last Wednesday night's meeting, the CIP funding for fire apparatus was discussed. One request was made by Cascade for their 2018 pumper tanker. That truck is a 1,000 GPM pump, 2,500 gallon tank, and meets the criteria that we talked about for a tanker, and the association voted unanimous to support that and bring it to the commission.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or anything for Chief Fowler for the Fire Rescue Association tonight?
That was the only request?
They did have a request for a brush truck, and I understand they didn't meet that criteria and referred back to Mr. Slim to work
Very good.
with that agency.
Very good, thank you, Chief.
Sorry, I just want to make sure. That's good.
All right. Item number 9, County Staff Report. Director?
All right, thank you. Just a couple quick things. I don't have any update that I can give you on Cool Branch and the county's negotiations with Franklin County on resolving that issue. The talks are still ongoing, but there's nothing I can publicly tell you. COVID vaccinations, we continue to work with our local health department and trying to get more of those out there. Also working with SOVA as well. During the ice storm last Saturday, we still were able to get about 1,500 vaccinations accomplished at the middle school, as long as we keep the power on, which Dominion worked with us. So we're still encouraging our first responders to sign up and get those vaccinations. Lastly, just I know you've been reading about it. You've seen some of the stuff I've sent out in the newsletters, but between February 13th and the 19th, we were really impacted by winter storms. Saturday the 13th was a little more than a whole lot more than what we were expecting. And, we saw a 625% increase in 911 calls on that Saturday versus the Saturday prior to that, which would have been your typical Saturday, normal Saturday. But our 911 center started out with only 3 people that morning. Those ladies had their hands full. By lunchtime, we had doubled our staff, and they did a tremendous job. But our volunteers and our county staff all alike came out of the woodwork. Really put a ton of hours in. Dean had a tree down there on 29. I think would have had enough wood for 3 winters. It was so big it fell, blocking 29. I know Ben got, I think, blocked in by a few trees. We had some ambulances get blocked in by trees. Our call volume on that Saturday was actually higher than it was on the day that Tropical Storm Michael hit us. I didn't think that would be possible, but it was. And, I think, just want to make you all aware of the amount of time that was put in by so many, especially our volunteers, and they opened their stations as warming centers, which was huge. We had a huge chunk of the county that went days without power. And, I know talking with the guys at Gretna, they actually had people come and just get water because they didn't have wells that were working. I know Cowlins had several people come out there and warm up and recharge cell phones. Talking to Laurel Grove, had people actually come down and do their laundry and take showers there. So just some examples of what goes on you may not know about. And I think you need to realize that, and, just how much our volunteer agencies put into serving the community. I think it's huge. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you, sir.
So I know we had some apparatus sustain minor damages during that. Some trees fell on some trucks and lights got broke off. Was anything significant to any of
No,
these?
sir.
Noteworthy?
In fact, I don't even think I filed.
Okay.
I don't think we had anything major that I can.
We did have one firefighter transported from a structure fire with minor injuries. That will be an insurance claim.
Yeah.
From the working fire we had, that was on the 13th as well during all of that. So
How are they doing, being they okay?
yeah, he's doing fine. He just got heat exhaustion, got too hot.
Very good.
Yeah, and then, during that time, not only were we dealing with that, we had several working fires during that stretch of time too. And, I think everybody over the last week, 10 days have gotten all the call volume they want to run for a while. So my hat's off to them. Thank y'all.
All right, very good. Unfinished business, funding committee report and recommendations. Again, we'll go back to Director Slint.
So in front of you, I'm giving you some things, and I think it's stuff we're going to have to really probably take back and digest a little bit, review. Mr. Smith would also like to make a few comments on that as well. But myself, Mr. Angier, Mr. Sellers, and Mr. Lovelace met several times to look at how we could fund and make it more of a equitable formula. So you understand, a lot of the funding where we are today, how we got to where we are today, came from funding that occurred in FY 15, 16, and 17. And we took the average of those 3 years back in the FY 18 budget, and kind of put that, I'm sorry, the FY 19, and put that together to come to where we were today. We had, everybody got 25% bump. But a lot of that, at that time, a lot of those agencies, there were some of them that were performing more services than they are today. Some have stepped back, and then some have stepped up. Like Cascade is an example, started off on transport service. So we've got to make it a little more equitable. So what we looked at among the agencies was doing a base amount of money, and then giving more money in addition to that base amount, both for fire and EMS. There would be an additional if you ran a certain number of calls, or dispatched a certain number of calls. Some people in this formula will gain money, and some will lose. And, there's not an infinite amount of money. We are strapped with a budget line. In fact, this is going to require us to add some money to that budget, which I've been talking to Mr. Smith about. But we gave a base amount for fire. We started out at $23,000, and then based on call volume, you would get an additional amount as you went down through there. And then also, and that is what you're being dispatched to. So at the end of the day, we have these service agreements that say if you don't run a certain percentage of your calls, you don't get your last payment. So, that kind of squares up a little bit if you've been dispatched to a lot of calls, but you're not answering those calls. So you would, that's where you don't get everything. So, and then EMS, we did a $25,000 base amount, and then you get an additional based on, if you ran over 900 calls, or if you ran between 500 and 900, you can get an additional amount. We gave a little more to EMS because a lot of agencies are now paying providers, either staff or giving sizable stipends, or paying some part-time people. Our EMS volume is just out the roof. It's continuing to climb, and that's not going to change. So that's why we funded a little more for EMS. But I think this is something we're going to need to, digest a little bit of. It is, I'm just going to tell you, some people win and some people lose. There's no way around that. We know we struggled with this for weeks trying to figure out the best and most equitable way to do it. But at the end of the day, we couldn't fix it where we wanted.
What is the criteria for a covered call? What constitutes when an agency has covered a
Well, now
call?
covered, the way we've done it.
For that last 15% is where I'm going.
Right, and the agreement that I made with the association back when we started this service agreement was basically if your agency ran the call, somebody from your agency ran the call, we would consider that covered. And there are times, and I'll tell you a good example, is we've had, like you have those callers, you get the 911 call for somebody fell out of bed. They don't need to go to the hospital, they just need help back in the bed. So a volunteer member shows up in a personal vehicle, puts the person back in bed, well, they covered it, they covered the call. So, they get credit for that. But we've also given them credit if, you know, we could have a staff ambulance run a call in place of one of the agencies, but they get, you know, their members showing up in their response vehicle, and we give them credit for covering that call. That was kind of a gentleman's agreement we had with them. It's never been in writing, but, you know, that's always been there. So, you know, as long as their people showed up on the call, we gave them the credit for the call. I think Mr. Smithman might want to add some to this due to talking about budget and budget.
I have a question for him too. Could you explain how this funding schedule is going to affect the county budget with the changes that are proposed, just so everybody in the audience can understand how this is going to go?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've had several conversations with Mr. Slimp about the concept. I did not get to meet with the funding committee, but am certainly happy to do that going forward. I only have one comment, and that's, and I understand the concept of having a minimum, what are you calling the base amount?
A base amount.
And then a pay per call going forward. I think that's a great concept. It makes perfect sense to me. I don't have an opinion as to the amounts necessarily at this time. What I do have opinion on is that we have a finite budget, and that annually we will budget a dollar amount of, you know, $1 million, let's say, that has to support these departments over the course of the year. And if we have a year where our departments have a 20% increase in call volume, we will not have 20% more funding to cover those calls. So I talked virtually with Mr. Angier about some of the concepts the committee was working on in its inception, and Mr. Angier had a concept where it would, there's a finite pot of money, and it would be distributed pro rata during that period. And Chris and I spoke about, well, what if we took the pot of money and divided it in fourths and paid per call every quarter, and it would always be a look back. So if there was $1,000 available for a quarter, and we have 100 calls, everybody got $10 per call. If it was less, you get more per call. If it's more calls during that quarter, you get less per call. So my encouragement to the commission is consider how we would do that, and I'm happy if the commission doesn't want to make a recommendation tonight due to not enough information or things still up in the air. I'm happy to meet with the ad hoc committee and talk about different ways we can do that. But my consideration on behalf of the board is it's a set pot of money, and we have to figure out how to distribute that fairly. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions?
I just have a quick question. Have these numbers gone out to the departments yet, or is this is the first time you broadcast them
This is
out?
the first time I showed it here to make sure we're good on. I need conceptually to see if everybody agrees with at least one thing, and that is funding, which we're talking about funding toward call volume. You know, the funding be toward call volume. Because if that's the case, then yes, I say, but if we're not going to go that route, then I wouldn't go any further with this. We'd back up and go to the drawing board. So I think conceptually we at least need to have an agreement. Hey, do we want to fund toward, that's what we're, and you can ask them, I think that's at least what for certain we're recommending is we fund, or we have a funding formula that's geared toward call volume. With some kind of base amount, because you know, there are those that don't run a lot of calls, but they still need the funding, and we don't want to hurt those people.
I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Has all the commission members had a chance to review the numbers and see what they look like and understand the schedule, the proposed schedule for the payments?
So the first responders would get the $7,500 regardless of the calls? Or
Yeah, they would just
be
get a
in the-
$7,500 fee because there's only 3 of them left, and they're
Yeah.
strictly, you know, and we're giving them that, but their call volume, we would only count the fire calls, because their call volume can be way skewed with the EMS side of things. So we give them the $7,500, but as far as looking at their call volume, we only look at the fire-related calls. They used to get, and just so you understand, they used to get, I believe it was only 3,000 for being a first responder, something of that nature, which wasn't much for, when you consider what all you're doing, plus you can't bill for that. You don't get any recuperation or anything for it, so.
Chris, I got a question. So the gap, and just help me understand, so on the fire side, the criteria is like, 50, 100, 150, whatever. I don't see what those numbers are now, but on the initial package you sent us out. But why is there such a large gap on the EMS? It's pretty much your base pay and then 500 and 900. Why didn't we put a little bit of a middleman in there as well? Can you explain that?
And I thought about that. One of the reasons is because, again, we don't have but a certain amount of money to go by. And if we're not careful, we have some people that would lose money, but if we're not careful, we're going to have people that's going to leave and lose more money.
Right.
So I was trying to figure a way to put that in there when we looked at it, and that we didn't have so many losses, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's a juggling act. And that's the best way I could come up with to do it. I looked at this thing in many, many ways, and I'm sorry, I tried to get this spreadsheet in a way that it would be easy to read for you all, because there's a lot to take in. It's a very busy spreadsheet, so I apologize, but that was the best I could do so you could follow it fairly easily.
Thank you. I'll just add, I was on the ad hoc committee that tried to tackle this bear last year, and it's like Chris said, at the end of the day, it's not easy to do, because I don't want to see anybody lose money, but with the only pot is only big as it is, there's only so much to go around. Somebody at the end of the day is going to lose and somebody's going to gain. So we struggled last year. We did this exact same thing, and we never really did much with it. We just pretty much kept what we had and moved on. And so I appreciate those guys that met and come up with this. I do think this is the route, this is my opinion, that we need to be looking at based off call volume, because you have your service agreement, that if the agencies are not performing based off that call volume, because some could argue, well, just because you get a lot of calls, you're going to get the most money, but that's not so much true. If you don't run those calls, you're not going to get all your money. But I'm not saying this is perfect, but I think this is the direction we need to be looking.
One thing I didn't get straight in my head through all these negotiations. The call volume that these amounts are going to be based upon, is that like last year's call volume for this year's funding, or is it going to be adjusted every quarter, or how are we going to do that?
What I'm basing it on right now is estimated for this year. When we started looking at this, I had 6 months of very good call data. And so I'm basing it on what would be estimated, which we're running pretty close to that when we do, except for when you get a day when you get like a storm, like we did the other day, because that skews it an unreal amount. So, but when you go back and look at our call volume over the months and in a way in days and weeks, we stay fairly average. We're seeing it climb some, but we're staying somewhat consistent with that since July 1. This will be I think that, at least since I've been here, this will be the busiest year we've had in call volume. That I do know.
So this budget right here is for the next fiscal year, based on this fiscal year's numbers.
Correct, yes.
Is that what you?
Yep.
So would that be true if you took the ice storms away?
If we took the ice storms away,
Would it still be the busiest year we've had?
oh yeah, there's no doubt.
That's not in those numbers, correct?
No, I haven't the ice storms haven't been put in here yet. Yeah, I put this in before
That's
we got
July
the ice
through
storms.
December.
Yeah, but the ice storms, even without them, there's no doubt we're going to run, probably at least EMS wise for certain, be the busiest year we've had.
January was the busiest year in 11 years we've had for EMS in Grutland, as far as dispatch. The 163 EMS calls we covered in 30 days. So it's been
Is
busy.
there a contingency if you have a disaster, like back in 18 with all the flooding that affected most of the county and those call numbers do swell, is there a contingency in to either factor those in or factor them out, one way or the other?
That's something I've been talking to Mr. Smithman about. There isn't, and how do we handle, how do we handle that? Because I think that's important to do. But I have been talking, last week made me start thinking, how would we handle something like that? Because you could have, in this county in particular, we could have, a bad winter. We could still have a bad spring where we get a couple of those severe windstorms and, your call volume gets skewed again. So those are things I've been talking with him about. How do we be prepared for those, and how do we, as far as help with funding? Because I know all your expenses go up when that happens. I mean, buying chainsaws, sharpening blades, fuel, feeding your people, all those things, you look at some extra expense. So I'm well aware of that. We're still trying to figure out with him how would we do that? Where would that come from? I have a little contingency that we have in my budget, but that's like if we need to buy a couple chainsaws, or I need to go rent a backhoe for something in an emergency. But I don't have anything like would be needed for this.
How is it handled in the county, and Mr. Smithers would maybe help with this, when other agencies like the sheriff's department or the landfill or other people run over, and they absolutely have to have more money? You're telling us we have one pot of money and no way to get any more, no matter what our situation is. How do other departments in the county, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, same correlation. And, the truth and the tough answer is we cut back elsewhere, unless it's a FEMA declared disaster, and then we are able to submit for reimbursement. But there's no new appropriations. Departments don't have contingency budgets in that regard. We have started budgeting contingency in our global $73 million, or whatever it is, $71 million general fund budget, but you're talking about 0.01% of the budget. It's a very minuscule amount, and usually it's earmarked for things that we think may happen. So, the tough and short and real answer is we eat it unless it is a federally declared disaster, and then we seek reimbursement.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussions? So, gentlemen, what's your pleasure? Do we recommend what we see here to go on up to the board, or do we need a further discussion on it? Do we need to just look more at the concept? First off, I'd like to thank the ad hoc committee that did work on this for your diligence. I think you've come up with a good structure that may be new to some of us, and it may be the most feasible way to do it. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure on this?
So it's my understanding the departments haven't seen this yet, right?
No, wait to see if this is the route y'all want to go with funding.
Mr. Chairman?
I think,
I'm sorry.
I think it looks all right, but I really, before I would say I'm going to approve it, I think the fire, at least the chiefs ought to be able to look at this and at least give us input. Because, we're here to represent them. We need to be able to talk to our fire chiefs in our district to be able to get input from them. I kind of like the way it's going. It might be a few questions, but I'd like to at least talk to the departments in my district before I vote on it. Do we have time for that?
Yeah. Nothing's been decided until the budget gets decided, so, that's the reason for giving y'all to look at it. If this is the route you want to go, then yes, I think we need to put it out. Let them look at it, because they're going to have questions, and, you guys can be prepared for those questions, and, we may come up, at the end of the day, say, hey, there's a better way, so that type of thing. But I think, give it to y'all for input, and then if you're good with this, then yes, I think it needs to go, before anything else happens, it needs to go out, and let the chiefs and captains look at it, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea by Tim, because, like I said, at the end of the day, this isn't easy, because I sat on this before, and it's hard. I know how hard, I'm a volunteer fire chief, as well as many in this room. I know how hard we work for our money and need our money, so, I don't know what the perfect solution is, but you got 4 or 5 agencies on here that's going to take a significant loss. So, I do agree that they should be able to at least see this and give us feedback, and then we make a decision or recommendation for the board.
Mr. Scares?
Yeah, I had kind of the same concerns. I think that we ought to at least get some feedback from the department heads as well as the Fire and Rescue Association before. This may be the route we need to take, and it may be the best way forward, but I think we better get some feedback before we go ahead and fully approve this. So that's just my take on it.
If that's the general consensus, gentlemen, I'll entertain a motion to send it out to the fire chiefs for review and feedback back through the association. Chief Fowler, if you can touch base with all of those folks to make sure that once we send it out, I'd like to hear back from them, maybe at the next meeting or in between now and then, to get their feedback on this schedule, see what they think. Is it? I'll make that motion. We have a motion from Mr.
I'll second that motion.
Got a second from Mr. Meeks. All right, all in favor of sending this back out to the fire departments, to the chiefs and the association, to let them look at this, to come back at us, to see what they, additions, deletions, likes, dislikes. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All right, anybody opposed? Thank you, gentlemen.
I want
Yes,
to
sir.
clarify, you're good with it as is? Nobody sees anything they change or anything, you're all good with it as is?
Yeah, I think we send it back as is,
Okay.
and then get the feedback to see if any adjustments need to be made at that point based on the feedback we receive, positive or negative.
Yeah, I want to clarify, I'm good with where, I just want to,
Yeah, that's good, yeah. It's a lot to take in, so I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Sir. Again, thank you, committee, for all your work on that. We appreciate you. All right. So, there was another item that needed to be on the agenda tonight. It was the CIP apparatus funding and placement. We talked about it in the last meeting. It needed to be under old business this time, or unfinished, because we talked about it on new business last time. We needed to appoint an ad hoc committee for that.
We have a committee. I have pulled quite a bit of data to give them. It's taken me some time to pull some stuff out of CAD for them.
Yes.
And we probably should meet within the next couple of weeks. I've got to send them all that, start reviewing. But it's just, there's a lot of data I've tried to pull out to look at when it comes in, as far as apparatus and replacing apparatus and where apparatus should be. Quite a few things I want them to be able to look at to make some decisions. So.
All right, new business, training reimbursement policy revision. Director?
We adopted a policy back about 2 years ago, or 18 months ago, as far as how we reimburse for training. And at the request of some of the departments, I think we need to look at that and increase the amount. It comes out of our training budget. The way it works is if Brian takes a class and he's a member of Mount Cross, let's say he goes to take his EMT class, Mount Cross pays for that class for him. Once he passes and has his certification and is running calls, we reimburse Mount Cross for that amount. I recommend that we go ahead and increase those amounts. EMT, I think we need to go up to 900. EMT enhanced class or advanced, I think it is now, we need to go up to 1,000. Paramedic, I think we need to go up to 2,500 at least, because paramedic is becoming a degreed program. It's not cheap by any means. And then, our normal ACLS, PALS, and PHTLS, we'd leave at $150. And then if anybody wants to go to the National Fire Academy, we just pay for their meal ticket, because everything there, once you get up there, is free. But I strongly suggest that we increase those amounts and maybe encourage more of our folks, hopefully, especially take some of the ALS classes, paramedic and so forth, it might be more of an incentive for them to do that. In our budget, by the way, our budget can handle this as far as my training budget.
can we make a recommendation to the departments that, especially for the paramedic level, that they put some type of agreement with that provider to stay there? I mean, that's a lot of money you're investing, and then they get it, and then a week later, they're gone. You don't see it anymore.
We work on some kind of agreement where they give 3 or 4 years worth of service or something.
Yeah.
A lot of police departments.
Tuition reimbursement agreement, because we do that, we do that also, and
Okay.
I mean,
you have to put in so much time signing the agreement, and if you default on the agreement, then you actually have to physically pay back individually the cost that was incurred or the money that was put out on your behalf.
Yeah, we do the contract as well. We have 3 right now taking their ALS in Patrick Henry, and we do the same thing with a contract. It's 2 years and so many hours and calls and stuff, and if they don't meet that, they have to pay it back.
So you do that with EMT as well? 'Cause
So the EMT, we have usually the same thing. If we pay for the class up front and the way we look at it at Gretna, and you guys may see it different, but the way I look at it as well, so like their EMT class, some people just can't pass it. But if they go and they try and they give their best effort, and they're there and they exhaust all the opportunities to test, if you can test up to like, I think it's 6 times or something, then we do not require them to pay back the, whatever the class fee is. It ranges anywhere from $500 to $1,000. But if, let's say, they drop out mid-class, or the instructor, most of the time I'm in touch with our instructors, they say, hey, this student hasn't done any of their classwork in weeks, or if they, just basically half-tail it, then we say, we have them sign that agreement that they will repay the money. That's how we do with just the EMTs. So.
Yeah, I was thinking, if the county's reimbursing the department, the county would just say, hey, on the paramedic level, we want you to do this. If the department wants to do more, that's fine. But on the paramedic level, that's a big investment. It's also going to be a continued investment because it's a lot of continuing ed that goes along with that every 2 years. They're going to get the ACLS, PALS, PHTLS. If you're going to put that much money into them, at least, try to keep them here, or try to, if they had to pay for it themselves, that's.
Yeah, because is this 2,500? Is that going to go towards their entire program, or is that like a yearly amount? Because see, if you take paramedic right now in a community college setting, it's a 2-year deal.
It would be toward the whole program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 2,500 is a lot of money, but at the same time, it won't touch what it costs to go to school. I took all my classes through community college, and it's expensive. So.
Right.
I think 25 would maybe cover part of our semester, maybe.
Yeah.
Just a thought, though.
I agree with you. I can work with Vaden maybe on some kind of agreement there.
But now, this is reimbursement, right? So the agency has to put the money out first.
Correct.
So honestly, y'all not gonna put any money out till you have a card in hand anyway, right?
Correct.
So yeah, it's gonna be the agency's negotiation with the person to pay the agency back.
That is
And y'all
correct.
just reimburse the agency, so.
Yeah, I just think the agency would want to do that because
Yeah.
that's a lot of money they're putting out. So.
My next question is, how would you enforce it?
That's the other thing we talked about in our office meeting was we make these people sign these contracts, but you got to be ready to also to execute the contract if they don't hold up their end of the deal.
We've had them, I know at Callens, we've had them take an EMT class, and then they got the card, they went somewhere else that was paying. But we paid them for, we paid for that, just looking at an example for EMT, but, how would you enforce the contract that the individual departments, because like I said, the county is not gonna put out any money until we present a card to them. So how would us or the individual departments enforce that? To make it to where they would have to to pay their money back.
So are you prepaying for their class, or are they investing the money?
Well, like you said, a lot of people, they want to take a class, but, I'm just using EMT, they don't have $900 to shell out.
So Mr. Duffer, in the agencies you've been affiliated with in the past, I know y'all did some in-house training like that, and there was some tuition that need to be paid back if it was defaulted on. Can you give some insight for the individual agencies, how they may be able to do that?
Well, one of the, you hate to say this, but you have to, sometimes you just have to go after them in court.
Yeah.
It's a contractual agreement that you made with that individual. You try, if you have other means, some of them have pay per call, they can withhold their, especially if they kind of keep them in the hole, they can withhold that last part of it. It's however you write it in the contract. I do know that it will uphold, and if you do take them to court, they'll uphold it.
Yes, sir.
The county does this with sheriff's deputies, and the sheriff's department has to front significant money for training, for equipment, for guns, for specially fitted vests, and we make them sign an agreement when they accept the job. And in it, it says if you don't work X number of months, you have to pay it back. There's a confession of judgment in there. And it's not, it doesn't make you feel good, but we've had to threaten to take them to court, and we've served them with papers, and what usually happens is either their new employer pays it, or we work out a payment plan for them over the course of, X number of months, and they pay us back. But we just got burned too many times, and it becomes just a fairly negotiated contract when you accept employment here. And it took some traction to get it going, but it's been successful thus far, although we hate to have to enforce it. We do enforce it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just look at it from, if we're gonna put that much money out, and paramedic is becoming, and as more, EMTs, we don't have the intermediate anymore. That is your ALS, as far as cardiac related, that's your ALS now.
Right.
If we're putting that money into people and we want them to stay, but if they leave the county, they go somewhere else, that, to me, that's taking money away from the other volunteers. That's taking money away from other training that maybe somebody wanted to take it. I mean, I'm sure at some point we may have limitations, but if that $2,500 went to somebody and then we didn't get any benefit out of it, that's $2,500 that couldn't go to fire training. That's $2,500 that could have gone to more EMTs. I just think if you're going to take that money from the county, however it comes, that you ought to be able to at least give the county a couple of years of service.
Now, the one thing, agency specific, one thing that I do know we do, and I've seen done is, you let the member that wants to take the training pay for a portion up to all of it, just put some skin in the game, if you will, and then based on their tenure after their certification, you reimburse them then. Say the EMT's $500, make them put in $250, you put in $250, they get their $250 back after 6 months of service or a year of service. I have seen that done in some of the agencies that I've been affiliated with through the years. So that's another option. But yeah, so what Mr. Hunt said, that's another way we can look at it as individual agencies, sign those contracts. Actually, if we need litigation to go get them, we have to get our money. So
Yeah, I agree. It should have some kind of teeth in it to say that, hey, we're not gonna put this money out for you if you're not gonna stay. But it's on us as a volunteer departments to put the teeth in it.
that's right.
And how do we do that? I mean, as out of a volunteer agency, we gonna be on the hook and says, Calvin's Fire Department takes Kermit King to court for non-payment.
Unfortunately, I think that's right.
Is that's how it's got to read for us to put any teeth in it, because the county here is not on the hook for it on the front side. We're on the hook for it on the front side.
Yeah.
So
Just out of
I
curiosity.
agree with the half and half. That's.
I was just gonna ask, out of curiosity, Chris, as far as for county staff, do you guys have any incentives, like, do you have an EMT that wants to go take that paramedic? Do you guys offer, what is and do y'all have a contract?
The county has a tuition reimbursement for people that want to further their education in any way. And since that is a degree program, they would be able to find some of that.
Okay. I was just asking.
So Chris, as part of this presentation on the fire rescue in the summer here, does the instructor fee and payment for the instructors, is that part of this whole package if we're going to move on anything tonight?
Well, that's been, we didn't increase that, that's what it's been.
So that's
Yeah, I
staying the
left
same?
that as is, yeah, that's what we pay like. And most of the time, EMS classes are going more toward tuition based, where fire classes, we still pay for the instructor and so forth. So that's more geared toward the fire side.
All right, so is there any other question about the actual amount for the reimbursement for the training that has been discussed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Basically, what you're talking about happens a lot. I got it in my department, it goes like a bouncing ball, and Dean and Meeks and Duffin and Casey, everybody knows the same thing. So, situation I had, what you run into, and I don't know if you're gonna put this at the EMT level or the medic level, but, you know, we recently just paid $1,400 for a subject to take a medic class, up in Pasadena, so everybody runs into it. So you got the husband and wife deal, you got the husband and wife split up, you got the boyfriend and girlfriend in, you got the boyfriend and girlfriend split up, blah, 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 okay? So this particular situation, you know, we're looking at $1,400. They sign the paper, they don't go to the class, they quit it, they gonna pay us back because we originally put the money up. When I get the certificates from these people, I give them to Chris and Mike Lee, they bring it to the county, they give us a check back, and just recently done an EMT for me, an advance for me. You know, and that all works out good. At the end of the day, and Duff, they hit a slap on the head. I got, and he's a good person, I'm not a good person. I got a boyfriend, girlfriend deal, you know, been living together 3 or 4 years, everything's hunky-dory. You pay and send the ALS class, and boom, they split up like a grenade hit the house. She's actually riding a truck down the rescue sport off of our ALS. Hey, okay? But I'm just saying, and that's just an example of what he's bringing up right now. Okay? I can give you 10 more scenarios in this county, just like, you know, but it is smart. I think Tim brought up a good thing. And we need to do a contract, and that's going to be us, to say, okay, we can take the money out of our treasury, send you to school, and you go pass the class. So we took the risk on you, and then the county pays me back, so the county's taking the risk on you. You know, because they invested in you to run rescue in this county. And at the end of the day, if you pop up, leave, move, quit, whatever, and we got an agreement that says you got to provide service to me for a year or 2 years, or X amount of calls a month, that's what you do. You know, I think it's a good thing to do that, and what he's saying, because it's still at the end of the day, and Matt's has brought up a good point. Suppose I have to take that person to court. Do I have to use my lawyer through the fire department, or it's like Baton Hunt gonna represent me through the county? I'm just saying, if you get to a court level, you take another step forward in this stuff.
That's more
But
money.
I'm just saying, like I go to Brian Fox, they go to $1,400, because I paid for your class, and the county paid me back, and you don't quit, and went somewhere else, you're not in my area, you don't live with this guy anymore, you don't run calls, you don't live with him. You know, I'm just saying, you know.
I mean, say we pay $1,400 for a call, we go to do court proceedings and everything, if we're paying for the lawyer, you can go $2,500, $2,600.
Put that in the contract.
That just ain't good money.
You know, I'm just saying down the road, that's something you gotta look at. I mean, I think most people would be scared enough to say, hey, pay it, we're gonna take it to court, just like Baton Law, but the county deputies. But at the end of the day, it's hard to take a volunteer, you know, volunteer and hold the feet to the fire and stuff, because there's so much flip-flopping in this county. People moving in, moving in. You got people in this county's named on 4 and 5 fire department rosters.
So not being a lawyer, I will look to Vaden. And, you know, basically, I guess when you draw that contract up as an individual 501c3 corporation with an individual, you can put whatever language you want in there, right? They could absorb the lawyer cost if they lose, or if they're found in breach of the contract, they pay everybody's legal fees, I'm assuming.
And I will not be representing them like that.
Correct.
As much as I'd love to, I've got kind of the county that would be a conflict if I got involved, but yeah, hopefully you might have a lawyer on your board, or somebody might help you out pro bono, or you can write the thing that the prevailing party has to pay the attorney's fee, the non-prevailing party has to pay the attorney's fees. But you're right, it becomes a balancing act, is it worth it to take somebody to court? A lot of times you can work out a payment plan, but it is something to consider, because economics always play, and common sense plays a part.
All right, so on the fee reimbursement schedule, go ahead and get moving forward. On the fee reimbursement schedules, any further discussion on that? If not, we'll entertain. If everybody's in agreement, we'll entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Supervisors to approve this new training requirement reimbursement.
So do we need to add in here what Tim's talking about? Because it doesn't say that in this.
I think that's going to be agency specific, right?
Definitely agency specific, but we
As
can't
far as
put in
the
there.
contracts for doing the classes?
We can put in there, it's recommended that agencies have contracts with students or something of that nature. I think that's.
Well, I mean, and could this body, with Vaden's help and county staff's help, maybe have like a rough draft of a contract, how it would be a good way for it to read, and just have that as a recommendation within this document here, and then leave it up to the agencies? Because like you said, it's agencies at the end of the day that's losing the money. So, because if a car is not presented to the county, they're not paying anything anyway. So, I mean.
We can give you a template, but I would suggest you use your lawyer eyeballs and craft it and tailor it to your individual needs and desires.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion, gentlemen.
I make a motion to accept the fee schedule as it is here for reimbursement.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, thank you. Thank you for your comments, also from the audience, thank you. Board of Supervisors Communication, Mr. Scares.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the Board of Supervisors at our February business meeting approved a few items that pertain to county volunteer and EMS agencies. The first thing we did, we approved a resolution allowing Blair's Fire and Rescue the county's tax-exempt financing to assist with funding a new used ladder truck. And we also approved the Fire and Rescue Commission's apparatus standards. One other thing I'd just like to pass on, I know I can speak for every board member, we want to thank all the agencies out there and everything, the hard work they put in getting us through this bad weather period we had, and it truly says a lot about our volunteers that you could handle that scope and that level of calls and keep the county moving, and I personally want to say thank you to all the agencies. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. All right, then we have the amended letter C that we added, fee schedule, discussion, and ad hoc committee appointment if necessary about the 911 fees for EMS calls. Mr. Meeks.
Yes, sir. So I didn't bring any actual prepared stuff because I had that last meeting, but I still have all my documentation. But I just think Tim, he said something last meeting, and I took it and liked it, that we need to probably be reviewing and just looking at, even if there is no recommendation for change, at least have an ad hoc committee set to review the fee schedule, compare it to surrounding counties, and then keep that thing up to date. Because I talked to Chief Fowler about this the other day, and I'm like I said, I'm not trying to say Pittsylvania County needs to be the highest fee schedule in the state of Virginia, but we do need to be competitive. I mean, we're sinking a lot of time and effort into this, and that is one of the main ways for us to recoup funds for these volunteer agencies where the other money falls short. So, you know, I would like for this body to put together an ad hoc committee, because I think it's been since 2019 since it was updated. So that's a couple years now, going on 2 years. We review the schedule. I'll be glad to be on it, or if anybody else wants to, and bring back a recommendation. And I think that should be a yearly thing. The commission can decide how they would like to handle that, but I think it, like Tim said last meeting, it should be looked at every year and then decide. Because my whole argument to bring it to the commission to begin with was off the med bags, but that itemized billing type mess, that's just too much. It's too much to try to handle, and once you do one, you got to do everything. And it's a logistical nightmare. So I think the fee schedule is the proper way to look at it.
So thank you for volunteering to be on that committee.
Yes, sir. No problem.
I would like to have a couple other folks, if I could get somebody else that would like to assist Mr. Meeks on that committee to review these fee schedules, to see if we need to do any amendments to them, adjustments.
I don't have a problem with that.
So I got Mr. Duffer, thank you. Mr. Angier said he'd work with y'all. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate that. Look forward to seeing what y'all bring back to us. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
I want to circle back just for a minute, Mr. Slim, to make sure we didn't miss something. With the Fire Rescue Association's report and then the hearing of the citizens, do we need to take any action on any CIP money for apparatus at this moment?
I mean, what you could do is at least, if you agree with their recommendations, accept that. You could accept what they have recommended.
Okay, I just want to make sure we didn't miss something.
Of course, we
because
have, I mean, like, again, we have this other ad hoc committee that we're working on with that funding and that rotation and CIP and placement. But I don't see why you couldn't at least accept it. There's nothing that you can do any further than that, because we don't know what's gonna be funded in the budget.
So is there any action in this body, any motions that need to be made based on that, or just acknowledge that we accept that recommendation?
I think
And
you should at
when
least
that-
by vote, I don't think there's anything wrong with accepting that recommendation. You know, if we get a truck, that would be one. But again, we have a committee looking at that stuff too, and we have not got to meet either, so I'll leave it up to you.
All right, just to bring everybody back to where we are, with Cascade asking for that capital money for that new truck, that 2018 engine or pumper that they were looking for, I think we need a motion to accept that recommendation. Fire Rescue Association, y'all on board with that, you said? That was approved from y'all's? Very good. All right, so at this time, I'll accept a motion to accept that recommendation from the Fire Rescue Association to put down if the funding is available for Cascade to receive that funding as one of the trucks if it's available.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion from Mr. Meeks. Second. Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Discussion on the motion. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Meeks.
How does this fit into the rotation that we've been talking about? Or is it totally unrelated?
Well, no, it's related, but no one else, you know, there's other agencies, I think, that would potentially would be higher on the list, but they haven't requested anything. So,
So do we have a due date when all that has to be submitted by? Do we have a due date when the CIP requests are to be in by?
well, we need to I've already requested it in the budget. I've already asked for equipment. I do that every year.
But for this body to be able to make its formal recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, do we have a cut date, a drop sundown date, sunset when it's got to be here?
I think would we have to actually have a drop dead date that we notified you of our CIP request? I mean, I've already requested it in our budget.
As far as where money will go?
Yes.
No, that's not near as important to us. We're going to budget the amount.
Okay.
You know, I certainly would love to know before the budget goes out, but it's not necessary.
And that the budget goes out.
We certainly would love to know your recommendation.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, thank you. All right, that brings us to matters from the commissioners. I'll start with Mr. Scarrow tonight.
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sellers? Mr. Lovelace?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Like everybody knows, I'm new at this, but anyway, I did receive something on Sunday, an email. The email must have slipped, and he gave me some guidance on it, but it's talking about safety gear and for all fire personnel when they're out there, whatever, they're cutting trees or whatever, and we had all kind of calls, and first thing I want to say is I'm not down in any agency here, because I appreciate every one of them, all the volunteers, and they do an excellent job. But then again, you got to look at the safety issues and the liability issues in that, and you need to make sure they utilize their equipment and so on. And one of the other things on it, and everybody knows, and I'm not a part of it, I don't have a Facebook account, don't want one, and I worked in this over here for 30 years, never had one, and I'll probably die without one. But that's how I feel about Facebook. It's just a good way to gossip. That's my opinion. And you never know who's looking at you and what they're doing, and they put on their social media. And this just so happened that one of the fire departments was talking about all the calls they had, showed pictures of people out there working, and had one that had no equipment using a chainsaw. And they just need to think before they put it on social media, because everybody's looking at it. The person that sent this to me fact, he worked in this building right over here, but he died right many years ago when I saw the name. But it must be another one, so I thought he'd come back from the dead. But anyway, I don't know if he lives in the area. I don't know anything. You know, he may live somewhere in South Carolina, as far as I know. But he did see it on Facebook. So I would caution the agencies to think about it and the people before they put things on Facebook.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Angier.
Well, to add to what Mr. Scare said, so those 4 days I was without power, I was nice and warm with my wood stove, my generator, while I know there was a whole lot of people out there working for free, making sure that everything's put back together, and I certainly do appreciate that. There was an injury somewhere. Was it an electrician or was it a volunteer? It was lineman. So, I mean, those things happen, it's a shame. So, thank you for your work.
Mr. Meeks.
Yeah, just the same tune. I just want to thank all the volunteer agencies, mutual aid, county staff. I think everybody did a great job. It just shows when we work as a team, we can accomplish a whole lot. It was one of the busiest weekends I had ever seen in over a decade, and probably several could say that. And I'm just glad everybody, I pray for that lineman, and I'm glad all the firemen and stuff was able to get through the event. We did, like I said, we had the one fireman that had to go to the hospital for heat exhaustion, but he's going to be okay. And we had during all of those trees down, power lines down, trees in the houses, you name it, everybody in the county had it. We also had a working structure fire. We was able to get 4 departments out there, had, a massive amount of turnout for the call, and was able to save a good portion of the places' belongings, the citizens' belongings and things like that, and they were very appreciative of it. So I just want to say good job and thank everybody.
Mr. Duffy.
I'm just going to echo that as well. One thing I want to add is with our FEMA declarations that seem to be more and more since 2018, it seems like it's an every year event, whether it be a tropical event, spring thunderstorm event, or in this case, an ice event. Each individual department is their own 501c3, and you have to apply a lot of times as an independent agency. The county cannot do that for you. Mr. Slint, we were talking about it earlier today in a conference call with VDM. Mr. Slint, what I'm asking is that maybe after we get past this ice event, we get a representative down here from VDM to help these individual departments. Some of them may not meet the threshold, or at least it adds to the county's threshold. So if the county meets their threshold, then it becomes they're eligible to apply. And I think the county's threshold is a little over $200,000. So
it is. I looked at it close to 3 actually.
yeah.
But and just so you know, I've had that discussion with one of the grant people at VDM about.
Okay.
Hey, if we get a federal declaration, would you come down here and hold a class for our volunteers so they'd learn how to do this?
Because that kind of goes back to, I'm not sure which commission member said it, but during these storm events, we do have a lot, we equipment may get tore up, and we don't have that emergency fund in the county, so if it is a declared event, that is a resource. You're not going to get 100%, and well, with COVID you will, but for storms, you're going to get about 75%. So, but 75% is better than 0. So, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. King.
Well, actually, first off, to echo what everybody said, thank all the agencies for everything that they've done, public safety, and don't forget our dispatchers sitting in there. We tend to forget about them sometimes, but they have to field all the calls before we get them. So if you see one of them, just say thank you.
Thanks, sir. Vice Chair.
So, yeah, to echo all of that, and the EMS agencies, I think the one in my end of the county there, at least one of them had 50 or 60 calls backlogged at one time, and they got through all of that. But even more than that with the agencies and what you saw volunteers out there doing, I'd like to even go one step further and say that we live in a pretty good location. because I saw citizens, average citizens, going down highways, driveways with popping trees to check on an elderly person that they knew of. And they were willing to take that risk. And I think the one thing that I saw that showed me the generosity of this community was at Southern States, and it was a big demand for generators. And they bought 5 generators in on a pallet, and they were sold instantaneously. But I stood there and watched one of our citizens look at another individual and say, I had this generator bought, but you need it worse than I do. So had them sell it to that individual instead of them taking it. So that's just the kind of people that we have here in the county, and that's something you don't find everywhere. So we're pretty blessed and enriched in this county to have those kinds of citizens here.
Again, same sentiment from me to the responders, to the telecommunicators and 911 Center, public safety, your neighbors, fellow citizens. I mean, it was a heck of a response by everybody. I mean, I listened to the county radio. I was out running some. I heard generator problems at stations where they having problems backfiring the stations. Some, the generator would run, it wouldn't transfer the power. Some of them had chainsaw mechanical issues, trees falling on their trucks during calls. But through it all, they made it. They got through it, and with no serious injury. That's fantastic. And to the 911 dispatchers, like Kermit said, you got to tip your hat to them. I mean, 625% call increase. That's ridiculous. It's amazing that they can pull that off. To Mr. Loveless's point, briefly, social media, I would strongly recommend to every chief in here that hears this or watching on the Facebook or however you're watching this tonight being streamed, adopt a social media policy for your agency. It will save you a lot of grief in the long run. Be very careful what you allow your people to put on social media. We have to restrict it in the agencies I run with, because if you take a picture of a tag number of a car, you put it on social media, that could be constituted as a HIPAA violation, because you can identify that patient by that vehicle. You have to be very careful. And so just make sure you have a social media policy. Make sure all of your dedicated volunteers understand what's allowed and what's not. And again, I had a supervisor once upon a time, a long time ago, say, if somebody's gonna take a picture of them, never let them get a picture of you doing something wrong. To Mr. Lovelace's point, if you're gonna be doing something, make sure you got your proper PPE on, make sure you're right. If the cameras are out there, everybody's got a cell phone and they will use it. They will take your picture and you will be Facebook famous before you know it happened. So please just adopt those policies and encourage your folks to just try to do the right thing at the right time. So that's all I've got. And at this time, we'll be looking at a closed session portion of this meeting. All right, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we go into closed session for consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. Legal authority is Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8. Subject matter is Keeling Volunteer Fire Department probation status, rather.
Have a motion by Mr. Scares, a second by Mr. Scruggs. All in favor of closed session? Or any discussion? I'm sorry, any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any objection? Very good. We are now in closed session. We're gonna do it in this room. We're gonna go.
We actually have a key.
your lawsuit going? Pardon? How's your lawsuit going?
Or you can read this paragraph and then call their names.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. Tucker is going to certify the closed meeting. She's going to read a paragraph. If you agree with it, vote yes, please.
Be it resolved that at the meeting of the Pittsylvania County Fire and Rescue Commission on February 23, 2021, the commission hereby certifies by recorded vote that to the best of each commissioner's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting. If any commissioner believes that there was a departure from the requirements of the act, he shall so state prior to the vote, indicating the substance of the departure. The statement shall be recorded in the commission's minutes. Angier.
Yes.
Duffer.
Yes.
Fox.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Lovelace.
Yes.
Meeks.
Yes.
Scarce.
Yes.
Scruggs.
Yes.
Sellers.
Meeting is certified, and now, if you so choose, you can adjourn the meeting.
Take a motion for adjournment.
Second.